Welcome to Points of View, a discussion of issues regarding persons with disabilities, moderated by Doug Usiak.
Today's panelists are Melissa Golpl, Disabilities Rights Advocate for Independent Living of Niagara County; Todd Vaarwerk, Director of Public Policy for Western New York Independent Living; and Leslie Saunders, Mental Health Systems Advocate, Mental Health Peer Connection.
Welcome. Today we're going to be discussing persons with disabilities in prison. I guess the first question that would come to my mind is, how do people with disabilities show up in a prison system? Yeah?
I'll take that one, Todd and Doug. The same way anybody else would show up into a prison system. They are convicted of a crime and found guilty.
Mm-hmm. Just the fact they go out and commit a crime.
They are alleged, go to court, go through a process through the courts, and are found guilty by a jury or judge, and are sentenced to the prison system, just like anyone else.
Let's get real here. If we're talking about people with disabilities, we're actually going to sit here and think that individuals who are quadriplegic, people who are blind, deaf, can really get away with criminal activity. Melissa?
Well, it's a myth. I think it's an urban legend that people with disabilities, especially certain types of disabilities, don't commit crimes or wouldn't be able or capable of committing crimes. That's not actually true. People with disabilities come in contact with all aspects of the real world. And just because you have a disability doesn't mean that you cannot be held accountable for committing a crime.
What about the situation of individuals who are aging within the prison population? Is the fact that the acquiring of disabling conditions, does that become an issue at all?
Well, absolutely it does. I mean, the more we confine people for longer and longer periods of time, the more age is going to make a disability more prevalent, especially a disability in the mental health arena, or a disability in a physical arena like diabetes, or, because they're not medically taken care of in prison as well as we might like.
In various areas of New York State recently, especially in Erie County, the county prison system has come under attack for less than reasonable accommodation for their prisoners, let alone persons with disabilities. I mean, is it realistic to think that prisoners or people with disabilities, once they acquire or if they have a disability, can actually even end up in these various holding centers?
Individuals with disabilities, and specifically mental health disabilities, will continue to go to county jail, state prisons. The services that are afforded them once they're there at times may be a concern to many people. I know there are many more prisoners than there are staff with the expertise to help address the many mental health problems. The corrections officers, whether it's in county jail or state prisons, aren't adequately trained to identify and then help an individual who might be experiencing psychiatric symptoms get the appropriate type of help.
And let's be clear about what's happening in Erie County. What the Department of Justice is dealing with are wide-ranging issues with the jail, of which one of those items is suicide prevention. So we're dealing with people whose disabilities may not be known necessarily to the deputies upon entering, but they have an acute episode, and deputies are scrambling to keep up. It's not necessarily perceived by anybody as a disability issue, which is kind of surprising to me.
So what about the physical or the communication concerns within a prison? I mean, that person with a disability who's blind, deaf, or is using a wheelchair, isn't the prison system the wrong place for that person to even be able to interact?
No, because it's the responsibility of those systems as being branches or divisions of local or state governments to provide reasonable accommodations. The Americans with Disabilities Act under Title II provides for that. Just because they end up in that respective system doesn't mean they shouldn't have access to the appropriate services or supports to allow them to participate equally.
Even inside of a prison system.
As a matter of fact, some of the most important decisions we've had on our rights as people with disabilities in the community when it comes to state and local government have come from decisions based on prisoners and state or local correctional facilities.
So what you're saying to me is that the prisons are able to accommodate the diversity that exists within the physical and or emotional variances among people with disabilities?
Oh no, not at all. We're not saying that at all. There's some significant difficulties within the prison systems in terms of making sure that those reasonable accommodations are provided, which is why so much of the Title II stuff was done by prisoners in getting policies put together or changes made in the prison system.
You have fundamental changes where officers in the prison systems were to be trained on how to work with the mental health population. Because of budget constraints, it was pushed to the back burner. It may take years of advocacy again to bring it back to the forefront. When those things continue to happen, individuals with disabilities, sentencing is just that much more difficult to go through, because frankly, if I'm having symptoms and I need help, I need not be punished again because of something that I can't control. And because you have staff without the expertise and the training, I'm doing 2 times of a sentence. I'm being punished twice, once for my crime and once because I have an illness which I'm not in control of.
So we're here to expect that the criminal and or the correctional facilities, they have to be service providers, individuals who understand disabilities on top of being able to handle criminals? I mean, if you perform a criminal act, you get arrested, why go out of your way to do anything?
Because as a citizen in the United States, my fundamental rights still are in place. If I need medical attention need to be provided for me regardless of where I'm at or my ability to pay for, even inside of a prison system, Doug.
And remember that the goal of the correctional system, from every level of the correctional system, is supposed to be rehabilitation to prevent reoffense.
Okay, we're going to take a break right there. When we come back, we're going to explore and look a little closer as if the correctional facility can actually handle persons with disabilities within itself. See you right after these messages.
Today, people with disabilities are participating fully in the social and economic life of New York State. In large measure, this is true because of the work of an independent living center in your community. The New York State Independent Living Council is dedicated to promoting the independent living philosophy and to facilitating access to independent living services. For more information on the council or about your nearest independent living center, call toll-free 1-888-469-7452.
Do you need to communicate with your customers, sales force, or employees? Do you need a video, website, CD, DVD, or PowerPoint presentation? Then look no farther than the video and multimedia artisans at Creative Concept Studios. From attention-getting TV commercials to unique trade show and corporate events, from digital video production to website design, Creative Concept Studios, mastering the art of communication. Call 887-3800 today for your free creative concept.
Welcome back. We're talking about persons with disabilities in the various prisons, and I once heard a statistic thrown out there that anybody who actually ends up in prison must already have a disability just based on the fact that they committed a crime serious enough to end them up in prison.
Let's get to the facts, Doug. Several years ago, the statistics were 2 out of every 10 people may have mental health disability or disability. Then you had a phenomenon happen in New York City. We know New York being a fun-loving town, all of a sudden, it's not so fun anymore because people who would panhandle, people who had mental health disabilities, people who would get arrested for nuisance crimes because of their mental health diagnosis were now taken off the street and put into the prison systems, Sing Sing and places like that up in New York City. That phenomena has caught on not only across New York State, but across the country. So there's been this explosion of individuals who should be in some type of treatment program now into the prison systems, because it was a way to stop the nuisance criminal.
Yeah, but when you think about individuals, especially with psychiatric disabilities, I mean, isn't that the reason why we have these psychiatric hospitals around the state or around the country, in order to accommodate those individuals who are, I guess, functioning outside of the accepted behavior?
Well, psychiatric hospitals are expensive. You know, estimates at around, you know, $220,000 per person per year in a psych hospital. Keep somebody in prison, you can do that for, you know, just under 26, 27. So if you're a, you know, if you're a chief of police or a mayor or a district attorney, and you need to be able to deal with, you know, with quality of life crimes, you're not going to deal with those mental health people by sending them to a $212,000 facility where Medicaid's going to be paying most of the bill. You're going to send them to prison.
Yeah, but even within the prison system, if somebody needs medical and or psychiatric treatment, doesn't the state and or the county pick those costs up anyway, Melissa?
Yes, they do, and they do provide the care, but I think part of the problem arises when those people are nearing their release because they've completed the term of their sentence, and we see the issues with not being linked with appropriate community care. That sets up a situation for repeat offenses based on some of the same behavior or situations that can occur from them not getting adequate treatment once they transition out of the institutions.
So if I'm hearing what's being said here is that you're coming from the belief that the person with the disability, while in prison, while inside the prison, although put into that prison, according to you, Todd, is an economic decision and not a practical decision based on the individual that is being charged or identified guilty of a crime. They're going into a situation that's got nothing but the future of failure?
Well, yeah, well, there is a thing about the standard of care that's provided in the various types of environment. When you get mental health care in prison, you only get it when your mental health disability is such that you're going to disrupt the routine of the prison. The bar is much higher. Melissa is technically right. They do provide care, but not care based on the individual medical needs of a prisoner. It's defined on the basis of that bar that says we're going to treat those people that are going to be most dangerous to the prison population. On top of that, versus a county jail versus Sing Sing or Attica or a regional correctional institution, you're actually putting them in a position where they're actually going to model worse behaviors. You're actually making the situation worse by that exposure in the long run when it comes to reoffense. So it's at least my position that rehabilitation's got to start from making that decision as to who is appropriate for a prison environment and who isn't.
Yeah, but we hear about rehabilitation of prisoners. Isn't rehabilitation already in the correctional facilities, Leslie?
You have many programs inside the prison systems, but I have to take advantage of them. I have to figure out how to help myself become rehabilitated. It's not like somebody's in the jail saying, these are the things you need to do, Leslie.
Wait. You're telling me the person who gets sent to prison then sits there and says, and has the right to choose what services or programs they want?
You will have afforded to you a menu of all sorts of services and programs. You can get to pick and choose. You're going to have some dialogue with a counselor, but by and large, unless you are...
There's option and choice within a prison?
Sure. Sure. When it comes to your education,
Steak or chicken,
and your
huh?
rehabilitation, and unfortunately, a lot of people choose chicken. They don't do anything. They go to jail and vegetate. Some people take advantages of the programs, earn their master's degree 2 or 3 times over, do their best to position themselves to be law-abiding citizens, but because of the stigma, because of the lack of education, because of the lack of readiness for individuals when they come home, people are really likely to reoffend because they can't get a job. Nobody wants to employ them. They can't find an apartment. Those things.
Yeah, but how can you throw that out? I mean, if we're talking about the person with a disability, I mean, the average person with a disability can't find a job in this economy.
Sure, but at least that person without the disability is given a chance. A person with a disability, they're really cast off to the side, especially if you have a mental health disability.
Now, it's the correctional facility, this menu of services and programs that Leslie's talking about, Melissa. Is there something for the person with a disability? Are we going to see that the blind person's going to get Braille glasses, the deaf person's going to get sign language? I mean, are those things actually within the prison system?
Oftentimes, they are identified as not existing until someone requests them or identifies a need for them. And again, we go back to the Title II responsibility of the correctional system. Being a division of local government, they are supposed to, they are responsible to reasonably accommodate the individual with disability. And the preference goes to the person with a disability as to what format is necessary or needed for them to equally access those rehabilitative programs that are available within the system. It doesn't always happen, though. I mean, we see many examples of case law where prisoners actually have to fight to get them and file civil lawsuits within the correctional system to get equal opportunity and access.
Okay, we're going to take a break here. When we get back, we're going to talk about what's out there after the person with a disability gets out of prison. See you right after these words.
Today, people with disabilities are participating fully in the social and economic life of New York State. In large measure, this is true because of the work of an independent living center in your community. The New York State Independent Living Council is dedicated to promoting the independent living philosophy and to facilitating access to independent living services. For more information on the council or about your nearest independent living center, call toll-free 1-888-469-7452.
Do you need to communicate with your customers, sales force, or employees? Do you need a video, website, CD, DVD, or PowerPoint presentation? Then look no farther than the video and multimedia artisans at Creative Concept Studios. From attention-getting TV commercials to unique trade show and corporate events, from digital video production to website design, Creative Concept Studios, mastering the art of communication. Call 887-3800 today for your free creative concept.
Welcome back. We're talking about persons with disabilities in the prison system, and we've talked about how they end up in the prison system, what may or may not be in the prison system. But the big question is, what's out there after prison? Are they just going back into a community for doom and failure? I mean, I've heard a lot of things lately, as well as a lot of discussion about what do we do for the person who's coming out of the prison. Leslie, I mean, what's the catcher's mitt here?
Well, inside the catcher's mitt, things are getting better for a person coming out of the prison systems. New York State and Erie County is a part of a larger national project of reentry programs. Prisoner reentry is huge right now. This is a menu of services that people can get once they come home. They're linked immediately with a treatment provider that starts before they get home if treatment is deemed necessary. If they need housing, they know where they can go to housing, get housing before they even come out of jail. Here in Erie County, there's approximately 1,800 individuals that will be coming into Erie County each year. About 4 to 600 from Orleans County Correctional Facility. These individuals have been slated to be able to access reentry support services.
So what I'm hearing here is that our society is expected to, one, accommodate a convicted criminal in order to make life easier for their disability within prison. Provide them a menu of services and programs that the person can pick from. Maybe the wrong decision, maybe the right decision, doesn't matter, the person can choose. And now what I'm hearing is that our society also has a responsibility, Todd and/or Melissa, to provide continuing services to coddle this person with a disability as they come out of the prison system?
I think coddling is definitely an overstatement. Yes.
Not the right language to use.
Even with these programs that Leslie's talking about, a person coming out of a correctional institution's got some significant barriers, a lot of which a disability would make far worse. You know, it would be bad enough if somebody said they had schizophrenia before they went to prison. Somebody comes out, just those two things alone in the evaluation for a job or a voc rehab program causes stigma issues that have to be overcome. We're not talking about coddling, but we are talking about doing the steps that are necessary to reasonably prevent reoffense. Because you come out and you deal with the fact that you can't find housing because nobody will house you, or you can't find a job because there's this perception you're a convicted felon, even though New York State has laws that say that your conviction history isn't relevant in most jobs.
Not only are you a convicted felon, but you're one that I need to really be worried about because of your mental health diagnosis.
Right.
That's a huge lift.
Even something like, one of the urban myths I've heard is that once you're convicted of a felony, you can never vote again. I mean, that's not true.
Well, but, why is it the community's responsibility to provide additional resources in order to guide this person or provide this person a life after prison, Melissa?
Well, because of living in communities and society, we have determined that there have been certain barriers, and I think groups of individuals have gotten together and figured out maybe if we can break this cycle, and it may take communities banding together and extra funding. I think the real issue, though, is providing equal access and opportunity. True, a prisoner, while they're incarcerated, does have the ability to either take the opportunity or sit around and not do anything and benefit from the rehabilitation that's offered from them. It's still our responsibility to reasonably accommodate them.
Why provide them the choice? Why not provide the correct type of service or program? Why sit there and say to a prisoner who created a crime, been convicted by the community, is sent away, taken out of society for a reason, and then give that person a choice to pick, and if they pick the wrong choice, why should we not be more involved in the directionality of that rehabilitation?
Well, how do we know that they've picked the wrong choice while they're in prison? What measure of the wrong choice is that?
Well, we have already identified the person has made wrong choices.
What, because they ended up in prison?
Absolutely.
So the correct choices in terms of rehabilitation are to deal with the thought processes and the needs of that person so that those choices don't need to be made again. That's the thing that we're talking about. We're talking about reasonably accommodating people so that they can take advantage of the rehabilitation that's already offered to prisoners, because we believe in rehabilitation more technically than we believe in punishment. We know it doesn't always work that way, but that's technically the way it's supposed to be. When they re-entered the community having supposedly paid their debt to society, okay, to have that discrimination continue on two levels, both as a person formerly incarcerated and as a person with a disability, we have to deal with being able to level that playing field so that they have an opportunity to not reoffend. Every time they reoffend, there's legal costs. There's costs in increasing police and fire and court protection. And then there's the cost of sending them back to prison again. probably in a more advanced setting than they were in before.
Do we know of any real success to what you're saying? Is there any statistics or anything that's showing that these prisoner reentry services and/or programs do work?
I don't know if there are statistics compelled. That's just not an area that I'm in, but I'm sure someone is looking at the numbers because they're popping up everywhere, and it's more than just a catchphrase.
This is something new.
It's relatively new, but it's spreading all over the country, so something is good somewhere.
But it's based on the same concept that we as people with disabilities have been dealing with for years for preventing deinstitutionalization. We're identifying that if we hook somebody up with services, and it doesn't necessarily have to be costly, we hook somebody up with somebody that actually advises them and talks with them about their problems and helps determine solutions, that they're less likely to go back to a psych center that's $200,000 a year.
As we have peer services for those with a mental health disability, in reentry, there's a mentoring, former individuals who were in the prison system who are now success stories, correctional officers who may be retired, now mentoring individuals who are formerly incarcerated.
And unfortunately, we're going to have to end here. But as you can see, as a person with a disability who may end up in prison for whatever reason, they also are entitled to the rights as a person within our society and our community, and the need for various services and programs to assure that they have the same opportunity to be part of our community. So we'll see you at the next show, and thanks for watching.
Points of View is presented by the New York State Independent Living Council, Incorporated, in cooperation with the Catskill Center for Independence, Finger Lakes Independence Center, Independent Living of Niagara County, and Western New York Independent Living. For the location of the Independent Living Center in your area, call toll-free 1-888-469-7452.